All right, welcome to 4.8. Complex numbers are a central question. How do you identify and perform operations with complex numbers? Up until this point, we've only been working in the real number world. We've talked about two real solutions, one real solution, and no real solutions. But a quadratic has to have two solutions. And we kind of talked in the last section that it could either be two real solutions, it could be one real and one imaginary, or it could be two imaginary. And so today we're going to talk about imaginary numbers and what to do when you get imaginary numbers. So to start out with, this is from actually day one. In your notes, I believe you have day one and day two. Day one is just a story, and I ended up skipping the story. But I want you to turn back there because there's some problems at the end that I want to introduce you to. And so if we ever get a square root of a negative number, what that means is that we're going to rewrite it using I. This is an imaginary number because you can't do the square root of a negative number in the real world. Okay. So what this becomes is it becomes I times the square root of 4. And we can simplify that even further because we know the square root of 4 is 2. And so this simplifies into 2i. Okay. I is really the square root of negative 1. Okay, so, to start this out, we separated it into negative 1, square root of 4. Then we converted the square root of negative 1 into I, and then we converted the square root of 4 into 2. Alright, so for this one, we can split it up into square root of, do that here. Square root of negative 1 and the square root of 18. Okay. And actually, we can split up the 18 even further, can't we? So we have square root of negative 1. This splits into 9. If we look at our list of perfect squares, it splits into 9 and 2. Right, the 18 splits into 9 and 2. Okay, now we just take it step by step here. And so the square root of negative 1, that's I. The square root of 9 is 3. And then we still have the square root of 2 sitting out here. Now I want to rewrite this just so it looks a little cleaner. 3i times the square root of 2. All right, lastly, with this one, we separate it. Square root of negative 1. Square root of, I wonder if 16 goes into that. 72 divided by 16. Nope, 16 does not. 9 does. Oh, 36 does. Sorry. 36 goes in 2 times. Okay, so we split 72 into 36 and 2. The reason we do that is because, actually, I'll do that. The square root of negative 1 is I. The square root of 36 is 6. And the square root of 2 is just the square root of 2. Okay, we rewrite it so it looks a little cleaner. 6i times the square root of 2. All right, so now flip over to day 2, and we're going to work with I. First, we're going to start by adding and subtracting stuff. And so in this example, since it's positive, if we distribute the positive, it doesn't really change anything. And so we can actually just drop off the parentheses if we so choose. Oh, minus 2 plus I. And then we have minus 3 plus 3i. Alright, now all we have to do is just combine like terms, just like we would in any other equation. And so 2 minus 3 is negative 1. And then here we have positive I plus 3i, that would be plus 4i. Now, when we're writing complex numbers, this is the proper way to write it. 4i minus 1, we do not write it like that. The complex part always comes last. Okay, so even if it maybe looks a little cleaner like this, you always have the complex part last. Okay, I want to emphasize that. All right, the next one here, since it's positive, since it's plus, we can just rewrite it as is. So plus 5 minus I. Okay, now we combine like terms and we get 5 plus 5 is 10. I minus I is 0I, and so really this is just our answer. All right. Now here, the parentheses are important here because we need to distribute the negative sign to both pieces. So we get negative 6 minus 2I minus 4 minus 2I. Okay, we combine like terms. Negative 6 minus 4 is negative 10. Negative 2I minus 2I would be negative 4I. Be careful there. Again, your complex part always goes last. And so that's our difference. All right, now when we're multiplying, it's very similar to, if this was an x, but there's a slight twist at the end. So we'll get there in just a second. First, we're going to distribute our I, and so we get 4I minus 8, and then I squared. Okay, now, a little detail here. I squared equals negative 1. The reason being is because isn't I the square root of negative 1? Okay, and so from here to here, if we were to do the square root of negative 1 squared, because that's what happens, from here to here we square it. So from here to here, if we were to square it, the square root and the square cancel each other out, and we're just left with negative 1. Okay, and so then, just kind of going a little further, I would suggest putting this in your notes. I cubed is negative I. Okay, it's negative 1 times I, right? So it's just negative I. And then I to the fourth is, isn't that just really negative 1 times negative 1? And so that'd be positive 1. Okay, this little list here is super handy when you are multiplying, because if you get I cubed, you need to simplify that down into negative I. If you get I to the fourth, that's just 1, so change it into 1. How I remember it, I still remember my classmate from high school. His way of remembering it was I won, and then the middle two are negative. And so you make your list, I won, and then the middle two are negative. And so that kind of helps me remember, at least. I don't know. So this would be to the first power, to the second power, to the third power, to the fourth power. It actually repeats, so this would be to the fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. We're not going to go any further, but it will just continually repeat. All right, so all that to say, when we go up here, we have 4I. We can't really do anything with that. But this I squared right here, that's just negative 1, right? And so here we have 4I and then minus 8 times negative 1. Well, that turns into 4I plus 8. Remember, we always put our number first and our complex number last, and so our final answer is 8 plus 4I. That's our answer. Okay, over here, now we need to FOIL it. Okay, so we're going to distribute, so we get negative 20 minus 15I, okay, plus 28I, and the last term's plus 21I squared. Okay, I know that I squared is negative 1, right? And so we have negative 28. No, I can combine like terms in here. Negative 15I plus 28I, that would be what? 13I. So plus 13I. And then plus 21 times negative 1. So I squared is negative 1, isn't it? Okay, and so lastly, negative 28 plus 13i minus 21. Combine these like terms and we get negative 49 plus 13i. And that's our final answer. Remember, the complex part goes last. All right, a little short on time here. I'm going to split this into two parts.